Hello and welcome to the RCA Institute webinar and discussion. Today we're going to be discussing modeling managerial objectives. So when you think about the reason an organization acquires resources, it's basically to achieve managerial objectives. Now, managerial objectives is a big word. It can range from a relatively small or intermediate objective to a final objective. So it can be anything from maintenance or cleaning to a saleable product or service. During this webinar, I'll be speaking for about the first 15 minutes or so. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to use the chat feature, but I won't be able to look at it while I'm going through the presentation. At the end of my presentation, I will turn off the mute and welcome any discussion or questions you may have. So I use this slide in every presentation. It's about resource consumption accounting. Resource consumption accounting is a combination of German management accounting methods that have been used since the 1940s and are still in wide use in companies in Germany and some other areas of Central Europe. And the activity-based costing methodologies to give you the process view. GPK focuses on capacity and marginal cost. ABC focuses on the process view. The focus of resource consumption accounting is internal management decision-making. It focuses on linking operational processes and metrics to monetary information, and it seeks to maintain clear cause and effect relationships that you see in operations into the monetary view. Some years ago, the International Federation of Accountants did a international good practice guide on costing and looked at a continuum of costing maturity levels. They found RCA to be the most mature method of costing, short of full real-time simulation. And I would argue that if you're going to seek to achieve full real-time simulation, and we do have some RCA instances that are very, very close to that, you're going to need to use RCA logic to achieve that. The other thing RCA does is it implements the foundational principles for managerial costing, and in saying that, we refer to the IMA's conceptual framework for managerial costing. The IMA framework focuses on causality as a principle and analogy or logical information use as a principle. And what it seeks to achieve through a causal model is an operational model that is costed, not a financial model that resembles operation, but rather an operational model that is costed. The costs are designed to be collected for and to reflect that operational model. That becomes your baseline optimization information, and then you apply information use concepts as you look at that. The conceptual framework, or the two principles of causality and analogy, are supported by concepts and constrained a little bit by various constraints. Today, we're going to focus in on managerial objectives so that we can see how RCA collects information about the many levels of managerial objectives inside a company. So let's look first at a very simple and a very basic RCA model, just to make sure, if you haven't been on other RCA Institute webinars, that you understand what we're talking about. So down at the bottom, we have what we call a results segment, or kind of a P&L for some component of the business. In this particular case, we have 3 products and a project that are the products or services that are produced by this group of resources. And we have what you might think of as primary resource pools. Those are the resource pools that work more or less directly on the final products or services. And we have what you might think of as support resource pools that provide support to both to each other and to the primary resource pools. You'll also notice the lines. The lines are the flow of resources from each resource pool to a different resource pool or product or services. And you'll notice some purple areas, which are what you can think of as business processes or activities. The dotted lines are for, well, what's important is the solid lines are a flow of fixed and proportional costs. The dotted lines are flows of non-causal costs. And you see, one of the things that RCA does is it does not distort the flow of resources or maybe the cost of an output with these non-causal costs. It accumulates them at a results segment so that they're known and they can be managed more appropriately. So let's look at the various types of managerial cost objects that we model. So we have 3 categories of those. We have resource-centric cost objects or managerial objectives. We have product or service-centric, and we have the results-centric. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through the diagram and talk about each of these a little bit as we and show them to you in the diagram. So the first is a resource pool. A resource pool are groups of homogeneous resources within an organization that produce a similar output. That can be a product, a semi-finished component, or something as basic as a maintenance hour. The term primary cost refers to the cost of the resources that are operating within that pool. Then there's the idea of a secondary cost, and that is output that's coming from a supporting resource pool. So for instance, almost every resource pool that has people in it is going to require some sort of personnel support. Personnel support is a secondary cost. The people in a resource pool are the primary cost. And resource pool cost objects are somewhat transitional. They exist to provide output to another managerial objective. So if we look at the resource pools, those are the green squares throughout this model. And you see up here we have the more support-oriented ones that support each other and support primary resource pools, and the primary resource pools are what you might think of as primary or direct, generally contribute to the sellable product or service in some more direct way. The next kind of resource pool were the purple arrows, or the business process. Business processes are the work or task being performed by a resource pool. Now in RCA, we don't always use a business process, and business processes, very importantly, don't have any capacity. They're typically a verb: operate a machine, conduct a setup, process vendor invoices, whatever. They're an expression or a description of how the capacity can be utilized. So they have two uses. They provide information, particularly if you're engaged in a process improvement or a process evaluation, and they can help you with modeling cost effectiveness. There are some areas where injecting a business process actually provides more information or more accurate information than just a resource pool to resource pool assignment. And again, business processes are transitional. They move the output to another managerial objective and just provide information. So again, the purple arrows in this diagram are the business processes. And you can see not every resource pool uses a business process as part of the assignment logic. And not doing business, using a business process actually complicates a model, but you have to weigh that when you model because it may provide valuable information. And a third type of objective is a project object. They're used to plan, collect, monitor, and settle costs for internal or external projects. Projects normally have a definite start date or an end date. External projects are normally part of a results segment because you're going to measure profitability against those. And internal projects can be used for establishing accountability for the resources that are used, so you know how much you're spending on a special project or an initiative. So we only have one project object here, and it based on the fact that it's reporting into a results segment, we would tend to believe that it's a sellable project that was done for a purchasing customer. Another type of managerial objective is an order object. And these are cost objects used to plan, collect, monitor, and settle the cost of specific jobs and events. They're usually short-term. I mean, essentially, they're short-term projects, although I guess they could be ongoing, and they're used for event and job costing. Just to be clear, we don't have any of those in this diagram. So the last type of object we'll discuss, whoops. Hold on just a second. We'll discuss the product objects, which are pretty clear. They're just products or services around which you collect costs. And the results segment. Now, the results segment is a little bit more complicated. It's a combination of different reporting dimensions used to represent cost data for various levels. The final output or collection of cost objectives. And a cost objective, a results segment also includes revenue, and it starts to incorporate also the resource use or the costs that that aren't causally assignable. So if you have excess capacity, those are assigned to a results segment. Now, a results segment is typically referred to in its management tiers. So you may have a results segment for a single product or service. You may have product groups or regional areas. You may have entire business units and corporate entities. And you may have all of these as results segments, and different kind of costs and resources may be used for each of these in addition to the resources used. For instance, you may have several products or services that you do a results segment for, but perhaps on the product group, there are resources that are only at the direction of the product group. So those would be included in the product group, but not in the product or service. The results segment reporting with management tiers, and they're company specific, can facilitate a manager's objectives for analysis, control, and optimization. There's nothing more frustrating for managers than being responsible for costs that that they don't either use and certainly don't control. So if you use something, theoretically you have a little bit of control over it, but for having some costs assigned where you just have nothing to do with it is very difficult. And RCA tries to focus in on causality so that there's a logical and articulatable flow of resources and costs that are associated with each results segment. An example of this is right here. So you see in the first part, we have, of course, there's the revenue. Then we have raw material for products, proportional conversion costs, and fixed conversion costs. That results in a product results segment. Then you may have product region distribution costs, which goes into a regional segment. And then you may have corporate R&D costs, which goes more into a corporate entity results. So this way, the corporate R&D costs aren't spread up here and mucking up the product segment results for that manager. So just going back, looking at the flow of things again, the P&L is here. Now P&Ls can also be done in different ways. Sometimes you can do them by the products themselves. Sometimes, and at some levels, it's valuable to look at them by customer or by distribution channel. So the granularity of the information that RCA collects can support looking at results segments in several different dimensions. Well, I hope I've given you a sense of how managerial objectives are modeled using RCA, and by doing that, giving you a sense of the information that RCA can provide to you. I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and unmute all the participants and encourage you to share. I have been recording. At this point, I'm going to stop